What's up, everyone? It's Riccardo Almeida here with another edition of the Riccardo Baleia Podcast. I've been away for about a week or so. I had the big John Gracie episode, and I kind of chilled out a little after that. And, I'm back with episode 16. And before we get to today's guest, once again, I'm going to kindly ask you guys if you can like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it, get it out there. You guys are going to love today's guest, old friend of mine. It's funny because I don't have many jiu-jitsu commentary colleagues. He's one of the only colleagues I could say out there in the jiu-jitsu world. Of course, I'm talking about the OG of jiu-jitsu commentary, Mr. Shawn Williams. How are you, sir?
Hey, man, I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show, buddy. Appreciate it. This is easy. This is sort of like, hey, man, it's back to the old shows here. I'm ready.
That's it. Last time we commentated together, I believe, was ADCC.
Yeah.
And we're just starting to ramp up and starting all the planning, the guys at Flow and, talking to Mo Jassam lately about ADCC, the next one. And, oh man, what a journey that's going to be. But before we get into any of this stuff, any of the commentary, where are you in the world right now? I know you recently you relocated. Yeah. Where are you? How you've been dealing with everything, these last few months with the whole coronavirus and obviously the last, the recent current events. Are you safe? What's going on with Shawn Williams and his family?
Yeah, we're safe. We're safe. We're having a good time. My wife and I are having a great time with my son. We've been all over, man, to be honest. We left LA. I sold my school in LA, so left it in very, very good hands there. And we took a short stint to New York, man. We moved to New York, and the plan was really to stay there. I love New York. My wife loves New York. But when we got there, my son ended up getting very sick. He got what they diagnosed as RSV, and he got pneumonia. He was in the hospital. And I guess one thing led to another, man. We decided to go. We were like, you know what? We need a break. We weren't even in New York for very long, but we needed a break. We were just like, New York is a very different place with children. You know what I mean? And so we decided we'd always loved Nashville. We'd loved it here. I've been here several times in the past. And so we decided to just take a short stint in Nashville. We're like, you know what? We're going to get out. We're going to go to Nashville. We're going to check out the scene in Nashville. And this was in January. So shortly after we got here, the whole entire coronavirus thing just happened. So, and New York just turned into, you know what it turned into? It turned into just a hotbed of a complete mess. We had a lot of, I've got a lot of friends there, and it just, and my wife has friends there, and it just turned into a big mess. So in many ways we were like, wow, we just dodged a huge bullet. And we've just been basically, we've kind of been hanging out really. Like, I'm eager to start to get the ball rolling on different things, different projects. But we're just been trying to take advantage of time with our son. Quarantine is not easy for anybody, but it's an opportunity for us. We've looked at it as an opportunity for us to literally see our son grow up every single day, because how fast they change. He's 2.5 yesterday, so they change just so fast, and it's something. It's been a blessing in all of this craziness that's going on, to be able to see him change on a daily basis and be like, wow, I'm eager to work again. I don't want to just sit at home and be quarantined, or, I'm in an office now, and I've been trying to get some things going on, but on the flip side, you just take that precious time and you say, hey, it could be worse. I'm pretty lucky. We're pretty lucky.
Yeah, I've been, this time home, I haven't really been able to train at all. I hear rumors about some people sneaking into the gym, but unconfirmed. But, I've been able to just, same thing, spend time with my kids and really, get to hang out with them a lot more. And, also trying to keep keep on top of all the media stuff and as much as I can, doing some, freelance stuff for Flow and my own stuff. So it's funny because we're busier than ever, and with the family, we're growing even tighter. So it's a very interesting time. We thought that the world was coming to an end, but really it's just changed a little bit, but anyways, I don't want to dwell too long on that, but my immediate question is, you sold the gym in LA. Are you still kind of like overseeing the affiliation there? Are you going to plan to go back? And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're it's like, it was a very, what's it called? It's the word, I slipped my tongue a little bit, but, it was tough. It's a tough decision because those people are my family, like extended family, bittersweet. That's the word I was looking for. But yeah, I left it in fantastic hands. I mean, and the plan is for me to go back and promote guys still and be heavily involved in skill development curriculum. They're still using my curriculum and be a voice for them constantly, because I don't feel, I feel very connected to everyone there. I think a lot about my past, and like I had a situation where I had to reopen a school. I mean, I literally was kicked out of my own school, basically. And at that moment, there was a moment way back then. This is 2010. There was a moment back then that I was like, do I leave? Do I stay? And I said, well, I got people here. I can't leave. I can't leave my people. These are my students. This is my extended family. I'm staying right here. And so, I did. And now it was time for us to move on. I knew a long time ago that LA wasn't probably going to be my home forever. But it was time to go. But I'm so looking forward to going back and getting back on the mats with all of the guys and keeping their progression going. It is not to bring up, but I feel like I've got a real heart for all the school owners out there. I hope that they're all doing okay. They're all figuring out ways to make sure that their business keeps the lights on. And it's a tough time, man. It's a tough time for school owners. And I hope that everybody's doing okay out there. I'm sure there are guys that are not, but I my thoughts and my hearts and my prayers are all with every school owner on the planet.
Well, same here. And I, for one, am interested to, see how things kind of roll out for you. And, it's kind of like this new chapter in your life and new location. And the one thing I give you credit for is, man, you've always done a phenomenal job, from my perspective, seeing the outside in, being your academy. I've come visit a couple times, amazing facility. And, you've built yourself out as your brand, as being you're the original jiu-jitsu commentator in my eyes, and I'm just interested to see how the next, kind of stage in your life, and I'll be there to support you any way I can. But, before we look at that, I want to talk a little bit about the history of Shawn Williams here. The first time I ever saw you, so this is a true story, was at the Pro-Ams, Raleigh, North Carolina. Yeah. And, you fought in the pro division. I think you even fought in the amateur division, if I'm not mistaken, too. Yeah. I remember you, like guys like Kenny, Nakapan, a bunch of the other OGs. But, that was the first time I saw you. I was training with Philip Smith. You ended up fighting Philip. Yeah. And, I remember you had those chops. You had those killer sideburns. It was hard to forget. And then I started to see you at some other tournaments at Nagas and Grapplers Quest. But at the end of the day, I guess the point I'm trying to make is you were one of the OG Renzo Gracie guys. You were one of the first black belts, American black belts from Renzo. Tell me a little bit about how you got started, number one, in grappling and jiu-jitsu, and how did you make your way to Renzo's, and a little bit about that training at that time as well.
Yeah. So, I remember that pro-am well. I actually took that pro fight that day. That wasn't supposed to be in the pro division. I went there to do the amateur division and go with Matt Serra to help corner Matt Serra. And then they said, hey, one guy dropped out in the 170 to 200. You want to do it? I was like 160 at the time. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Anyway, Yeah, I did karate very early. You know, in my childhood, I loved Bruce Lee movies and Jean-Claude Van Damme movies and
Same here.
Steve
Same here.
Seagal movies. So, you know, I'm sure our generation is full of that. You know, Chuck Norris is even a little bit of Chuck Norris. But you know, and I started in karate, went through karate. I was very fortunate in the dojo that I was in because it was in this little town called Markle, Indiana, which we had, you know, that's where my parents live. And there are 1,000 people in that town, but there was one dojo, and we had a lot of different teachers in the dojo, and there were like maybe 7 of us students, you know what I mean? So, but the instructors were very open to just whatever. We basically sparred. We learned a lot of, we did a lot of sparring, a lot of basically, you know, just karate, but there wasn't a lot of kata. There was, but it wasn't traditional. We basically sparred, which I always say, like, I had no idea. We sparred with open finger gloves called Tiger Claw TC 2000. Yep. You remember those? With headgear, and we could take each other down. I mean, we didn't know anything on the ground, but we could take each other down because we had some basic, like, classical Japanese jiu-jitsu, which had some, you know, no disrespect, but had some sort of sloppy judo in it, you know what I mean? And for sport wise, and so we could do takedowns. So that was already ahead of its time, and I didn't even know it. And, you know, to make a long story short, I saw Renzo fight on TV. I was up in upstate New York, going to school in New York, not knowing what the heck I wanted to do with my life. And I saw him fight on TV, the World Combat Championship. And at that time, there had only been Hickson, if you knew, like, you had to get VHS. Otherwise, no one knew who Hickson was. And Hoist. Hoist was, of course, the big name because the UFC was, at that time, this was 95. So everybody knew what UFC was. No one knew who Hickson was unless you really dove into that world. So there were those 2 guys that I was like, you know what, this kind of looks cool. Like, maybe I need to do this jiu-jitsu stuff because I'd done martial arts. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I'm like, I got to do this. And then I saw Renzo fight, and I was like, whoa, this dude, you know, I knew nothing about any of the family, but I said, this guy fights different. You know, he moves around different. And this is without knowing anything about the family, of course. Like, I know that back in the day, Hickson was like the king of the kings, but I just knew I liked his fighting style better than I liked Hickson's.
It was like the polar opposite of Hoist's.
Right.
Like, Hoist's was, you know, allow the guy sometimes to take him down, you know, heel kicks to the kidneys and set up an arm lock or triangle. Whereas Renzo was like forward, aggressive, taking down wrestlers, you know what I mean? Like, punching, and it was just like the yin and yang of jiu-jitsu and MMA or Vale Tudo at the time. But I'll let you continue. Sorry.
Exactly. No, it's great. Like, he looked like he knew everything. Like, he looked like a boxer. He was boxing. He was moving around. He was wrestling. And so I was like, wow, this guy's fighting style is fantastic. And then I saw an ad in Black Belt magazine, believe it or not, that said he was opening in New York City. And so later that year, I took a trip down to New York City actually, it was the following summer after the school year was over. I drove out to New York. I visited him, and, you know, it was Renzo, classic Renzo. So he was super nice, super welcoming. And I said, well, I think I just want to come here. If I'm going to do jiu-jitsu, I'd like to come here. I knew nothing about New York at the time, New York City. I was in upstate New York, but drove out there, rented a place, and just started training. I went to school to borrow money to train jiu-jitsu. I mean, that was literally my college education paid for jiu-jitsu. Wow. And so, you know, and I began training. And there were guys like Matt Serra, I was a blue belt on the mat, and all these different guys on the mats that I would grow up with. I mean, they were beating me up the entire time, but I grew up. And I always say that I consider myself just exceptionally lucky that I just went there. I just followed my heart. I met him once. I was like, this guy is amazing. Let's try.
Yeah.
And that's how I started. I mean, that's in a nutshell, that's how I started. Yeah. And then I just, I became like, I have a personality that when I really like something, I just go.
All in.
And that's why, like, I didn't surf in California. That's right, because I didn't want to have any other temptations. I really love martial arts and jiu-jitsu. I mean, it's like, it's for myself, and it's just, that's what I really love to do. People ask me sometimes, like, what's your hobby? I'm like, what do you mean? My hobby is jiu-jitsu, martial arts. That's what it is. It's kickboxing, it's jiu-jitsu, it's MMA. That is my hobby. That's my profession. That's my hobby. I'm sure, just, you know, it's just like the same as you. I'm not talking to anybody that's not outside the same realm of mindset, but and I just loved it. I wanted to do it as much as I could. I wanted to be as good as I could. And I didn't even know where it would lead. I just really had a good time with it. Back then, in that day, there was no such thing as, there was not a career in martial arts as far as I was concerned. I still went to school. I still just thought, hey, I'm just going to be as good as I can at this and see what happens. And it just kept moving forward.
And what was the early days of training at that academy? Because, you know, from what I remember, from what I saw, you know, there was a lot of the best of the best from Brazil coming there. And, you know, and that was when Renzo was still training to fight. And, you know, compare that to modern day, you know, Renzo Gracie Academy, you know, 1,000 students and, you know, beginner classes. You were kind of like, not just you, but like everyone in that era, you get thrown to the wolves. It's like your first class is like, here's Americana, here's guillotine, now you roll. You know what I mean? So what was your experience like, your first classes? And, you know, sometimes I like hearing about the early days, because I almost feel like there's this raw sense of the training back then that maybe we're a little bit missing these days, you know, just a little bit. Some of it crazy, some of it unnecessary, but some of it a little bit good. So tell me about those early days.
Yeah, well, it was everyone was in the same class. You know, there were 2 classes a day. There was a 12 o'clock class and a 6 o'clock class. 12 o'clock class was usually taught by a young man named Vinny, or there are a couple of the Brazilians that taught that class. And then that kind of merged into Ricardo Almeida and Rodrigo and Matt. And, but that was a little bit later. At 6 o'clock, Renzo taught the class. It was an hour of technique followed by train until you are done. And, you know, so we would regularly be done about 10 o'clock. And, my first class was, I tell everybody this because, you know, people think that the heel hook phenomenon was like, as a new thing. Like, no, the system is fairly newish. My first class was an inside heel hook. That was my very first class. It was a knee bar, and it was a cross heel hook off of a guy trying to replace guard, like shelf the leg and cross heel hook. That was my very first class. And I was like, what is this stuff? This isn't what I saw on TV. Like, I saw the guard, but then, you know, it's, and then we just trained. One of my very first, my first, I like to tell this story a little bit. My first black belt I ever trained with was Mauricio Gomez, Hadra's dad. And he helped me out quite a bit. He was just such a very nice fella. But that was the first black belt I ever felt like, and I felt like, this guy weighs like 3 tons. I don't even know how am I ever going to be like that? I'm never going to be like that. It's very nice to me, but it was impressive the way he displaced his weight. But it was kill or be killed, basically. I mean, like that, you know, of course, in an environment of trust, because you tap, no one at Renzo's was like, you tap and you get your arm ripped off. It wasn't like that. I think that obviously everything comes from the top down, and so people weren't like that. We didn't have those problems where you know, you heard somebody yelling like, "Hey, I tapped!" Like doesn't seem to exist at the school. But what did exist is, like, you'd roll and if there wasn't mats on the wall, you'd roll through the wall and you kept going. Like there was just this mutual like toughness, and like you don't need to stop, and we can keep going until somebody taps. In general, when we trained back in the day, that was the end of your training with someone, was when you were tired. There were no rounds. There were nothing. It was training basically until you were tired. I mean, every once in a while, I think in the first like little bit of training, Renzo would be like, "All right, guys, get a new training partner if you want." But those rounds were probably 10 to 30 minutes long. There were no like timers on the wall. It was just train, you know, and that just kept going. Like you just train until you're tired, and then you would take a break, and then you would train again until you're exhausted, and then you would take a break. And it was like this, you know, it was train, don't complain, you know, tap or be tapped. And that was it. It was as simple as that. And I think that's kind of what's lacking a little bit today, is that it's like, oh man, you kind of went hard on me. Well, it's tap or be tapped. And it was in the old days, people didn't get hurt because they knew that you need the tap, and injuries were not common. Even though the training was hard, it was not common that people got injured. It was usually an accident or freak thing. I think, you know, knowledge helps that, and understanding of you're trusting each other, and there wasn't drama, didn't seem to exist. Yeah, just wasn't there.
You know, you mentioned talking about the heel hook. I still remember, I got a flashback when you're mentioning it. The first Renzo seminar I went to, he showed us how to heel hook, an inside heel hook. And I remember he was like, if you do the outside heel hook, you know, you can roll, you can get out this, but inside, you're fucked. He's like,
it's been around for a long time. You know, and I really think that that's why, you know, some of the systems have just gone crazy with John, and he's a genius. But I think the influence has always been there. Renzo is very open to everything, and that influence trickles down, and it just makes you like, you have a much broader sense of like, there is no cheap. You know, there's not, you know, the olden days, like footlocks were considered cheap, cheating, that never existed. I mean, we never had that. We never had any sort of opinions or stipulations of anything that existed in jiu-jitsu. We could use it all. And it was, I think that I was very lucky to come from that type of open-mindedness.
Now you mentioned John, and, you know, you obviously, you know, a lot of people know that you spent time training with and learning with him. What would you say was the kind of like the biggest difference in the teaching style between Renzo and John? You know, from the outside, I've been at both of their classes, but I want to hear from a student. You know, like Renzo was obviously a little more charismatic and a little more, you know, a little funnier and a little more, you know, little different style. John's a little more, all right, you know, let's start the class, use your techniques, go roll. So in your eyes, what did you take from each of them? Like, what were the benefits from each of them as an instructor?
You mean in current modern day, or because when we were coming up, like, I guess that would be different, because my teachers were, you know, it was Renzo, Matt Serra, Ricardo Almeida, Renzo Gracie. Those were my main teachers, because John and I came up together. But I guess if we're talking about like the instructor that, you know, like that John has become, because he's just a freaking genius. This guy's just another level of geniuses. I think I don't know that their teaching is much different. I think, you know, it's because Renzo's mind for jiu-jitsu is probably one of the best in the entire planet. I think he innately thinks about jiu-jitsu much differently than a lot of people, as does John. I don't think there's really, I don't think you can compare the two, to be really honest. They're two different humans. They both have an innate world-class ability to understand jiu-jitsu. I think that, you know, John is involved in it basically 24/7, 7 days a week. So when that happens, you are going to evolve things like that. Renzo's not, I don't think, even though his mind might be there, but he's not actively, he's not on the mat 24/7 is like John, you know, and I think to do what John's doing, that's why you can't compare the two, because I believe that you have to look at variables, and the variables are how much time on the mat is an individual putting in, because not to get too carried away, buddy, but when you're talking about if I have someone that says, how do I get good? Well, there's no secret on how do you get good, especially these days. There's world-class education at the touch of your fingers anywhere. And there are so many amazing human beings. I mean, look what Flo's doing. You watch competition after competition. You can see the A-listers, world-class guys on a daily basis. And you can, even if your instructor isn't world-class, you can see world-class people. You can be world-class even if you're in the middle of nowhere. If you just have, a little bit of discipline and a decent head on your shoulders. There's no secret to getting good. It's be on the mat for a lot of time. That's how someone can become a 3.5-year black belt and beat world champions, because they're on the mat 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day. That's what they do. And you can get very, very good very quickly if you do that. Same as an instructor. When you're on the mat teaching and you are seeing this hours and hours and hours a day, you become very creative. At least I know I do. When I do it a lot, things start to flow. Those two are, that's how they are. You put Renzo on the mat for 16 hours a day, you're going to get some stuff that no one's seen yet. I mean, he would come to the academy and be like, I dreamed this, and let me see if it works. And it would work. And be like, okay, yeah, that's awesome. Seriously. So that's the kind of mind that he has for jiu-jitsu. And I think that everyone in his past would say the exact same thing. I think the rumor is that he was talent-wise the absolute best that ever came out of Gracie Barra, and largely out of the family. I think that's a pretty safe argument that you hear a lot of people say. And I think it was because of his mind and the way that he looks at jiu-jitsu. When he taught us, and what I mean by us is like the generation that I came up, the generation before me was just Matt and Rodrigo and Ricardo. And my generation, which is John and myself, and then the guys a little bit below us, Joe D'Arcy and those guys. He taught everything he knew and as detailed as he could teach it. So we didn't just learn moves. You learned why and when and how. I always feel like the part that you can do your students, if you're an instructor, the absolute best service is to teach them the context of what the technique is. And that's what makes a great instructor different than just an average instructor. I mean, if you teach an arm lock the same, but you don't understand the context of when to use it, what are the pitfalls of if you use it, what to look out for, and then the branches of that, of where that can go, then you're missing a massive amount of jiu-jitsu knowledge. That's what Renzo did. Yeah. Renzo did that for all of us. And he taught not only like just the technique, but like why, when, what happens if you do this, what to look out for, what not to do. Here are the common mistakes. And so then that makes a whole lot of people very, very, very good because the knowledge is so deep. And I think that's what happened.
So, it leads into my next question, because I've always meaning to ask you this is, as a commentator, and whenever I listen to you speak about jiu-jitsu, I'm always learning something new. I'm always like, oh shit, like Shawn knows stuff that I haven't really picked up on yet. And I'm always wondering, how is he still learning stuff if he's if he left Renzo's all this time? So what is it that you do as an instructor and as a fellow commentator to kind of stay on top of the current game? Because every time you call the action, you know what the players are doing, whether it's, no, I don't want to get into whether it's you're training with them, but there's guys that I'm sure you're not training with that you know what they're doing and you can identify it. So what are you doing as an instructor and a commentator to kind of understand what the new trends are and stay on top of the game?
I study tournaments. That's something that I really enjoy doing from day one. I have a friend named Ron Garrett in Indiana. Shout out to him. He used to send me all the VHS tapes that he would get from Brazil. And I used to watch them all the time. I watched competitions for an hour in the morning and usually an hour at night every day. And I feel like that's a very good way to continue your learning, because one guy doesn't typically do everything amazing. He's not going to do everything amazing. And so you need to study many people. And you need to learn, you study the facet of jiu-jitsu, the world of jiu-jitsu. I always say, when people say, who's your favorite guy to watch? I don't have one. I don't watch one guy. I watch every guy. I study the world of jiu-jitsu, and if it's working at the higher levels, and it's worthy of study. And that's what I did from an early time. And I think that's what I still do that. I love to study tape. It's something that I'm working on right now, a little bit of like how to study tape thing. And I'll put it out. I'll make you hold me to it, buddy. It's been something that I've been talking about for a while, and it's finally have the stuff to do it. Because I think it's important how you study tape and how you study people, but you don't study the person to go, that's my favorite guy. I have favorites. Don't get me wrong. I think you and I have a mutual old school favorite in Margarita.
Yes.
He was one of my favorite guys to watch just because he was exciting. But then you start breaking down some of the things that he was doing, and you're like, oh my Lord, like, look at these little things, that these nuances that he's doing. Yeah. And then I would do them in the training hall. I'm like, oh my God, it works. Like it's a little tiny nuance that you can pick up, but you usually pick them up by watching the same match or matches like hundreds of times. I mean, it takes a little bit of like, you're beating your head against a wall, how many times you need to watch the same match to pick up some little tiny thing that he's doing to make this work.
Or watch a highlight video. Did you ever find yourself in your earlier ages like making highlight videos and studying it, or just popping it in?
One of my favorites, it was Mark Lehman's Remix.
That's it.
That's one of my favorite VHS tapes I ever had, because that guy, he was a smart guy. So he did the setup and the sweep or the finish or whatever it was, and then he did it multiple times. And back in the day, because it's VHS, it saved you some time of going rewind, rewind. Save the head of your VCR some mileage. Now, of course, you can hear like 10-second rewind on your own accord, but that was a great tape back then, because you could see it over and over and over. And I think that's what you do when you study tape. When I study tape, and for competitions or for commentary, it's hours of study for like we did ADCCC. I probably studied for like 4 days of multiple hours just to get ready for that. And some of the stuff, Ricardo, you don't even use it. You're like, but it makes you better as an instructor. It makes you better as an athlete or a practitioner of jiu-jitsu. Yeah.
One of the things that I found myself doing when learning a new position is, kind of similar to what you were saying. For example, like my school, very heavy on De La Riva, reverse De La Riva. I messed up my knee, so I couldn't do it anymore, because my distance making leg was the one that was sticking out. Everyone was messing with it. So I was like, okay, what am I missing in my game? I'm like, shit, I'm going to let them pass and I'm going to play half guard. I'm going to suck them back, but my half guard sucks. So one of the things that I did was, I was like, all right, who's the best half guard guys out there? I was like, Bernardo, Lucas Leite. I saw some other guys, but I was like, those are the two guys that, to me, have really strong systems. So I basically went out and tried to, find all of the instructional stuff I could, all of their highlights, all of their matches. And then I just studied and studied and studied. Then I taught it. And now I could finally say, my half guard is tremendously better than when I started this journey due to my injury. Do you ever find yourself kind of, learning positions like that, or kind of not just studying tape, but even like taking some of the instructional stuff still at this age?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what, you said something that, that made it, that tops it all off. You said you teach it. And so I think there's a progression of learning. Number one is you have to see it. Usually seeing it is, as humans, we usually need to see it first. And then we can, I like that. Oh, wow, I like that move. I'm going to go try it. So then you go and you experiment with it. You try it. once you try it several times of failing and starting to get something to work, you get it to work on the younger guys. And you get younger, what I mean by younger is like the guys with lesser experience. You do it on the lesser experience. Then you're able to do it with guys that you're having your battles with. And then you start to maybe even be able to do it to the guys that are better than you. And if you're an instructor or not, or just have some sort of ability to teach a little bit, you teach it. And teaching, in my opinion, is the highest level of learning. And when you start to teach it, it cements things in your head that you knew you might already know it, but when you teach it, oh my, you really have to learn it then, because you have to know why you do it. I mean, if you go down the road of, I'm going to teach something and I'm going to teach it well, I'm not going to just teach it, I'm going to teach it well. Well, then you need to know it. And if you hold yourself accountable to be a great teacher, well, then you have to do the work to know it, to know that technique inside out, forward, backward, left, right, all of the things that might come off of it. And that's when that move or technique starts just to go to another level. So you said that there, I'm like, that's it. Yep. Teaching, in my opinion, is the highest level of learning, and everyone should do it. Whether it's, of course, like, I'm not saying you go and start like teaching at your instructor school. I'm sure there are protocols to follow, but even teaching a buddy, when you get to that point in your journey, obviously you need to be efficient enough to teach things. But when you do get to that point in your journey, it'll be remarkable what happens. I think what you might think of like, oh, that's why I do that. Even though someone might have told you do it, why to do it hundreds of times. You're like, that's why I do it. And now you got it. Now you've got it.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of this question that I just asked you, looking at it from a student's perspective, one of the guys I recently interviewed was Shaolin, and he said that he tells his students, he goes, guys, you're starting to learn jiu-jitsu in the worst time ever. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, because there's so much freaking information out there that by the time you get into the academy door, you got your phone, you're on TikTok, you're on Instagram, you're on YouTube, and then you're going in, and then the instructor's telling you one thing, and you already have this preconceived notion. It's like, how do you empty that glass, of knowledge? So what do you think about, the current state of jiu-jitsu with just like all the technology at our hands, and how do you deal with the student that comes in maybe that already feels like they know what you're supposed to be teaching, or maybe even tells you, hey, well, so-and-so does it this way. Well, how do you deal with that? And what do you think of that statement?
Yeah, that is a great, it's our great world that we live in today. Yeah. YouTube is great. It's the yin yang principle, right? YouTube is the best thing ever and the worst thing ever. Now, it's fine. There are many ways to do things, but when someone is going out of their way, for number one, the best thing to watch, the absolute best thing to watch, in my opinion, are competitions. Number one, competitions. Because you're going to see A-list guys. And what I mean by competitions, I mean like elite level guys. You're going to see those guys perform it against other world-class guys under pressure, and they've got to do what they want to do the way they want to do it. Okay. There will be no filler in a competition. None. They've got to perform it as it should be performed, the best that they can. And you might see techniques done different ways by different individuals. So right there, you can say, hey, you know what? I saw, a single leg like that, and I saw a single leg like this. Well, I can try both of them, and which one works for me, it's great. When you're dealing with instructionals, what you need to keep in mind, if you're a new person to jiu-jitsu, or if you're not a new person to jiu-jitsu, there's an element of credibility that needs to be had. And it's not that everyone can't go teach whatever they want, but you need to understand that there is credibility in what we do. The world-class instructors are different than the non-world-class instructors. It is a different ballgame. World-class instructors are are doing it for hours. And like I mentioned, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours every day. And they understand how to teach, why to teach, and they become world-class instructors. There's credibility in that. And I think when you just want to see a technique, do some homework first to understand who are the more credible instructors, and then learn from those guys. Credibility can come many, many different ways, because it's not just can they make champions, because that doesn't necessarily account for a credible instructor. That counts for a lot of different elements of credibility. Yep, you may have world-class technique, but you also have someone that's willing to train for 9 hours a day and commit that time. Not everybody has that. So there are credible knowledge-wise can be a pretty broad and difficult to find element, especially in the ages that we live in now. People can go online and say, this is how you do an arm lock, but where did they come from? Who are they? What have they done something? There are those checks and balances that as a newbie, you should look at before you just start. Hey, I see this guy. I like what he does. He's exciting to watch. But what are you getting? And make sure that you're getting quality, because there's a lot of it. There's a lot of quality. Yeah. And you want to make sure that you get quality, and then it will work in the academy.
Talking about technique development and training at Renzo's, one of the things that I always admired, we briefly touched on it, was, Renzo's Academy was pretty diverse. I did an interview with Ricardo Almeida, and we were talking about the evolution of the arm and guillotine, and how, Renzo and Ricardo was one of the, those guys were some of the first, no-gi grapplers to really pull that off in high-level competition. But you developed kind of like your own system. You developed the Williams Guard. I remember back in 2001, Mark Bocek came to train with you and was showing us a little bit of this Williams Guard that he learned, and it was really cool. And it's and the stuff that you showed at that time, or that he showed me at that time, is still, I still use it to this day. It's foolproof. So what was it about? How was it training with Renzo? And the fact that you guys were able to kind of develop your own variations of technique. And of course, we see a lot of different guys at Renzo's have their own variations. They have their own, they're straying from the cookie cutter of the Gracie Jiu Jitsu, the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that most academies did. So, what was it like in that atmosphere? Like, how were you able to kind of develop your own game, and why was that academy and that team so kind of adhesive to building all these new techniques? What was so special about that team and that gym and the training of your time?
Yeah, I think, again, the way that the open-mindedness of Renzo brings that dynamic on the mat of like, yeah, you got to create. You want to, is something new? Yeah. He brought new things to the table all the time. I think that first of all, that energy brings more of it, for number one. But then we didn't make, because a couple of my friends used to call Renzo's the lab, because there are so many things just coming flying out of there. We didn't make them because we were trying to make moves. We made them because we needed to. Things happen that when you have a genius on the helm in Renzo, you have that genius there giving you other elements of, here's what you guys want to do. It just starts coming out, and when you have training partners like Matt, Serra, and Renzo Gracie, Riccardo Almeida, and then you've got you've got Hyan coming in, Half coming in, Nino coming, and you've got all these world champions coming in regularly. Things start coming out, and then before long, all of a sudden, what we were bringing from that place was literally like a new jiu-jitsu of the time. I really do think like there were things going on down there that were like years and years ahead of what people were doing at that time. There are other schools that are like that as well, but we were definitely on the forefront and cutting edge of technical innovations for sure. But they came because we had to. You know what I mean? I didn't go with that guard. I didn't sit there and go, what can I do? How can I create this guard? It came because I saw Nino pull his leg over his head in the academy, and he got applauded everybody. And then I was flexible like that. I tried it, and we were training for fights, and the guy I was training with had I had a tank top on, and he was sweaty, and he kept sliding out of it. And then I just literally reached under my leg, probably because that grip had come from somewhere else. Maybe we had used it. I don't remember if we used it somewhere else, but I just reached under my leg and held his shoulder, and all of a sudden I got him in an omoplata. And I'm like, hey, I think that might have worked. And then I did it again and again and again, and repeated it. And then my training partners learned about it, and then they started countering that. And then I had to build a frame, and it came because it just kept evolving into something, because I couldn't omoplata somebody pulling my leg over the face when they were sweaty. And so that happened. There were some, like, Ricardo had this, I called it the Almeida at the time. It was the arm in guillotine, that was like this.
Yep.
Jack Hermansen uses from Norway. Yep. That one, that was Ricardo's. I mean, that to me, he brought that to the academy. He used to do it from back control. And I was like, wow, that's genius. The Darce choke is actually, I used to call it the Danaher choke, because he was the one who really brought that to the academy. Joe D'Arcy just got the name from it because I believe it was Mayhem Miller. I believe that. Did you hear this story?
Yeah, I know. I think Layman and Mayhem were. Yeah. And then Layman and Mayhem were calling it out at tournaments or something, right?
Yeah. This Darce guy finished me with this thing. It became synonymous with him. But I used to call it the Danaher choke, because that's really who brought that one to the academy. But these things were just coming off. I tell a story, and one time in class, we were doing an arm and guillotine count flow thing off of, this guy counters this, then you do this. And a white belt was finishing a guy. And the guy was like, hey, this is happening. Renzo got in there and it finished him. And he was like, hey guys, everybody come over here. And he let the white belt teach what he was doing. The kid was doing it by complete mistake. Well, it was a technique the guy was doing by mistake, but it worked. It was a strangle. And so then that was it. Then this became a strangle. That's how open-minded he was. There's a no-gi clock choke that was made by accident by Rodrigo. So I wrestled for a Division III college called Hunter College, and we were doing some tight waist breakdowns. And there was a figure 4 tight waist on an arm, and I taught Rodrigo that, you got to see this. This is really great to turn people, and he did it wrong, and I was like, no, you got to grab under both arms, not just under the neck. He did it like we roll, the turtle roll. Yep. Well, he did that, and then the guy started tapping all the time. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he did it. And I was like, man, this is a freaking crazy strangle. This strangles you. And so then it became like almost like a no-gi clock choke with an arm in. That's why things happen by mistake. They happen because they need to.
And we touched on it really briefly as well, but when did the whole system of the leg locks kind of come into play? Because you're one of the guys, again, like, when a lot of that came out, you were on it. You knew it all. You spoke the lingo. You're in the what is it? The single leg X and Ashigarami. We have that argument all the time, but it's like, but you were ahead of, you knew all that stuff when a lot of people were still just catching a glimpse of it through, some of the work of the DDS team and Renzo's guys. So how did you kind of develop that style and that whole, system as well with Danaher? Like, can you talk a little bit about the origins of that system and how it got developed at Renzo's?
Yeah, sure. I'm very lucky. I came from there, and I told myself when I went to LA that I would always go back because there's something special there, and because they have so many great people, it's always going to be a place of innovation. And then you got John, who's this complete genius that just keeps going and going and going. And he's a very good friend of mine. I feel very fortunate that I can go and pick his brain, and, you know, we can go back and forth with different things. But way back, probably in 2000, maybe 99, 2000, late 2000 is probably when it started. I believe John had seen some footage of a Sambo guy doing ankle lace, leg lace, you know, really. And that's kind of what really started the whole thing, because we used to do ankle lace on a regular basis. There wasn't this big, massive system at that time. But what was for sure was that we were, you know, fortunately we had all these world champions coming in, and we got to test this stuff on people who were world champions, training on a regular basis. When any of us put people in leg lace, we noticed something very staggering, that they never got out. They couldn't move. People just had no idea what was going on. They could not get out. And then if you had good finishes, then it was a matter of time before people were tapping. And we were, you know, John showed me, I started doing it, and I just was like, whoa, this is some strong stuff. Now for me, which we can talk about this later if you want, before, otherwise I'll get off on a tangent. You know how I am.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all good.
Jiu-jitsu, in my opinion, should be the jiu-jitsu that you learn and want to master, especially if you're a competitor, should sit well with you. And so for me, I was never a guy that liked to leg lock guys. Like I like it because it's efficient, and I like to do it in training, but it was never one of my things in jiu-jitsu to because I like my jiu-jitsu to work for fighting. That's always what I really kind of like, that pretty, hey, this works in MMA. I just like that style of jiu-jitsu a little bit better than leg. But back then I was like, hey, wow, this stuff works, man. And it pins people and they can't get out. And then cross heel hook is there. Back when I used to use it, we used to do a lot of the calf slicer, right? And I have a very funny story. Actually, Mark Bocek was the guy that was in the story. He's a great guy. But I fought him in a tournament in 2003, I believe. And when you're talking, I'm going to find a picture and I'll show you the picture. Mm-hmm. But I put him in leg lace way back then. And I got him in leg lace. Now I busted the ligament, my LCL on a match with Nakapon, like right before it, pulling my foot over my face, believe it or not. So when I put him in there, I couldn't generate enough finishing power. I had it. I was going on what normally people would tap in training, and it didn't submit him. And that day I didn't just go, hey, let me reflect on this. But that's kind of where you started that like, this probably isn't a good, like, it doesn't have enough breaking power to actually finish somebody in a tournament. It was a pretty good learning experience for me, in that what you do in academy and tap people doesn't always happen in a tournament. You know, a perfect example is Craig Jones and Vinny. Like, you know, you lock on a heel hook in a training environment, and guys are going to tap. But if you don't really have good breaking power in a tournament, they may not be tapping. You may have to break their leg. And if you don't generate that much power, which in a calf slicer on ankle lace generally does not generate enough power to break somebody's leg, it may not finish them. So it was a good learning experience of like, oh, ankle lace and leg lace, whatever you want to call it, is a fantastic hold and fantastic pin. Now what comes off of that? How do we finish guys off that? And then to boot, we had a kid that was a blue belt. And this is the dangerous part of leg locks, mind you. That's why I believe John said the same thing. He's a big believer in fundamentals first. Leg locks are later down the line. Not later, but like to specialize and to be only a footlocker is very dangerous for your progression. Why? Because you can get widely successful with footlocks pretty quickly if you speak the lingo that they don't speak. Now, because he's made those DVDs, you know, the world kind of knows the basic lingo. Even though that thing is just evolving like crazy too. I mean, they're doing stuff now that they weren't doing back then that it just keeps it going. But we had a guy, a student of John and I's, that became very, very good at heel hooking guys. And he was only a blue belt. And he was a good blue belt, but he's a blue belt. And he got, I think, enamored with the fact that he could heel hook black belt world champions. They come in, he'd heel hook them. And this happened on a regular basis. And so then he sort of became tunnel visioned and just only stayed on that. And then what happens is your training partners get better and better and you don't, and then you can't finish those guys anymore. And now they're starting to finish. Guys that weren't finishing you are finishing you. And you stay on that single-minded track, and then they keep getting better. And then now you quit. That happens. And it can happen if you get to tunnel vision, but that was the beginning, I believe, of what really and John's the one that took the footlock thing and just went nuts with it. At one time we called him Johnny Leglock. This was when this is all evolving. He went through several nicknames. He went through like Johnny Armbar, Johnny Kimura, Johnny Leglock. But this is when he was Johnny Leglock, was back when we were purple belts. That's when this whole thing really started. And then he's kept going with it. And I just used it from time to time to pin, to pass. I actually used that position to pass the guard, different things like this. So my emphasis was a little bit different route. What do I do with the footlocks? A little bit different than what he did. But he made this genius system. So that was kind of the beginning of it though.
So when we talk about the leg locks, you know, we're obviously kind of focusing more on the no-gi. But what I'm starting to notice is a little bit of a different system when I look at the gi guys and I look at some of the gi competitors. And what I found is some of the elite level leg lockers in the gi at like the IBJJF tournaments have the ability to threaten the leg, but also sweep simultaneously. And that's where they're most dangerous. Whereas some of the no-gi guys are more so, you know, they're attacking the legs, might be a scramble because of the slipperiness, but it's a different kind of sweep, you know. And the guys that I'm noticing in the gi, you know, Cavaca, Felipe Andrew, Bianca Basilio. So how do you kind of change the leg lock game in your view when it transcends gi or no gi, or are you keeping it pretty much the core of it the same?
For me, I keep it the same because, like I had mentioned, I don't typically. I mean, in training, yeah, it's one thing. Yeah, okay, I want to practice my cross heel hook. So you do it a lot. You got to get good. I want to get as good as I can at it. But then, you know, if I were to go back and use it in a competition setting, or, you know, I keep it the same. And really, it's a pin and then an advance of position. The leg lace is still in my opinion, it's still everyone should investigate time or designate time to be good at that, because with the gi you can do it now. You just have to be very careful how you do it, but you can do it, and it's an exceptional pin. And you can sweep with it. You can sweep with it from anywhere on the bottom. I mean, you get there. It's not difficult to get on top if you're decent at having an ankle lace situation. So, you know, that for me, that's what I do. For now, if you're a leg lock specialist with great everything, it's different. You know, I think that you're looking to get to that cross heel hook position, strongest heel hook for sure, and it can be widely different how you recover based on what footlock you use. You know, those things can change the game big time. Yeah,
got it. Okay, I got two more questions for you.
Yeah.
So one, you know, I get this question. It's crazy because the people have, you know, I've been doing a couple other podcasts, and randomly I get people messaging me too, and they'll ask me how I got into commentating jiu-jitsu. And, you know, man, like I've told you before, you're in my opinion, you're not just the original jiu-jitsu commentator, but you're a guy that can do, you can play. You could do play-by-play, you could do color, good. You could do it all. Your depth of knowledge is so good. How did you get into commentating? And at what point did you feel like, hey, I like this, and, kind of continued with it? I always meant to ask you. My impression is it started with the Hickson Budo Challenge. I think that was your first one.
Correct.
And then it went to ADCC and stuff like that. But how did all that come about?
Yeah, correct. You're correct. Hickson was looking for, as far as I know, Hickson was looking for someone to do voiceover. Actually, we didn't do live commentary, believe it or not. It was a voiceover. And he really wanted to add that element to, I think he wanted to add it live, but they just didn't have the technology at that time. So he wanted to add some voiceover to make it more exciting to watch. And he had asked, and Renzo had told him, hey, you should talk to Shawn and see if he wants to do it, because he knows what he's talking about. And so then Hickson had asked me. I was very honored that he had asked. And it was myself and Shane Rice. We sat at Hickson's house and did it. It was free. It was so fun. And I enjoyed it. And I think it just, for me, it's just a natural thing, to talk about jiu-jitsu. I could, you want to have this podcast for 12 hours? Let's go, man. I can talk all night long about jiu-jitsu. It's just what I really love it. And I love to be good at all of it. I like to know all of it. It's just something that I really feel like it's my passion. But after the Budo Challenge, the IBJJF started broadcasting their events with Budo videos, and they were my name had come up with the IBJJF, so they reached out to me and said, do you want to try this? And I said, yeah, of course, I would love to do that. And just that was it. We had a great time with Budo Jake and Budo Dave and Caleb. We had just a rock. It was a great time. And I was very, very fortunate for them to keep bringing me on. Very fortunate for the IBJJF, because I think they're really who said, hey, we want Shawn to do this. And that was it. And I just have fun doing it. And I just wanted, I want to be the best at whatever I do. And if I feel like I don't have time to do it anymore, I'll say, hey, I'm not that guy anymore. But right now, I just want to keep researching. I just love it. I really enjoy it. It's fun for me.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed with your commentary too is that you may not you do it probably. I don't know if you mean to do it, but I feel like your commentary is entertaining and educational for both fans and non-fans, and that's something that I try to also do. I always think about the person that's watching that maybe just got into jiu-jitsu, and if you overwhelm them with too much intricacies of the technique, I feel like they're just kind of lost. But I always refer to this one occasion. I remember watching a trailer for Worlds. Remember when Budo did the black and white, beautiful trailer they did, and they had the music, and I showed my father that, and he was like, wow, I gotta watch this. And then he's like, this is what jiu-jitsu is? I'm like, yeah, Dad. And I was like so proud. I'm like, finally. So we put it on and we're watching, and he's just like, I gotta go watch the soccer game. Old Italian guy. He's like, he just couldn't get into it. But it was not to knock the people that were doing it at the time, but I think that sometimes as commentators we can get too into the intricacies, and I always try to find a happy medium. And I think you're one of the best at doing that. It's not too. We got to geek out a little bit, but at the same time we gotta respect the fact that there's some new guys good there. But talking about commentary matches, big match this weekend. Gordon Ryan versus Kyle Boehm, and we got Ty Ruotolo and Nicky Ryan. Let's hear some predictions. Tell me what you gotta you can't be too biased here. You can't.
Yeah, no. Well, I don't like predictions. I never. What I am intrigued by are, what does each guy have to do to be successful? That for me, that's where I like to do things.
So we'll call it an analysis here. Let's call it an analysis.
I just like that. And by the way, you do a fantastic job. I love working with you, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with you. And let's keep doing it.
That's it. Thanks, brother.
But To me, Kyle has his hands full. I mean, I was there. I commentated Kasai, and the guy, I'm sure, is a wonderful guy, but he's got massive holes in a system that Gordon has mastered, and he's up against a guy that can do that in his sleep. I would never put, the wonderful thing about jiu-jitsu is it's jiu-jitsu, man. And, you can't ever count anyone out. But he's got, Kyle had a lot of great attacks at Kasai, but he didn't have any way to get his attack started when people knew what was going on. So, and I'm sure it's been a while since then, but if I was his coach, I would have him work on that element of really the setups more so than just the submission. Because if he gets it, he seems to be great at the highest levels. He can finish very, very good guys. He's done that.
He looks like he's got that Tex Johnson, freakish strength that
right.
If he hits it, it could break. But
absolutely.
But again,
absolutely.
If the technique is just off a little bit, or if there's a gray area, I agree. I think that's where he could get totally exposed, from Gordon, and who you said can do this in his sleep. You know?
Absolutely. So I think that's a tough match for him. I really do. It's hard to say that there's a clear way to just solve the Gordon Ryan's game, which lately no one can solve. Not that there are things that every human and every athlete has their holes, but it's just going to be very difficult for him to find them. And then the two young men it's going to be amazing, I believe. I feel like Ty really his biggest hole has been the legs. Like that's where I think he's got to be careful of not just getting footlock, leg lock. It's getting leg entangled and then something else happening, a forward advancement, or getting his back taken off of a scramble out of something like this. So I feel like he's going to have to be very careful. But what he does do, man, he's here 1 second and there all the way over there the other. And that's what is going to be difficult for Nicky, I believe, is to lock him in. That's where he's going to have to shine, is not only with entries and the systems that they have there, but he's going to have to lock him down. And that's going to be a very, very tall task, because Ty is very athletic, very fast, very slippery, and very technical. And so that, I think that the style matchups for there is what makes that an interesting ordeal, because you've got a very, very different. I mean, Ty's got all of the head arm strangles down to a science, and he's very here, there, passes over here, then he's over there, then he's out of your guard and 5 feet away. And so versus Nicky's more calculated, more, I wouldn't want to say technical. That's not fair to say, but like I would say, if you looked up a technical display of passing, and you'd probably see more Nicky's picture than Ty, because Ty is more unorthodox. I believe he uses movement and in and out to get where he wants to go. Nicky, I think, uses intricacies to get where he wants to go. And I think that will be a really nice style clash, and each one will have to make sure that they stay in their wheelhouse to have some success there.
I gotta say, I agree with you. I think that I mean, my only thing is Ty, I feel like, has been a little more active since ADCC.
Oh yeah,
so that might give him a little bit of an edge there. Obviously, Nicky a little bit more knowledgeable in the Leglock, or not knowledgeable, more familiar with competing in that. But man, I can't wait to watch it. Sometimes I think about that one, and I'm like we're obviously a little more excited about this one than the Gordon one, which is crazy, because it's almost like an expectancy sometimes now with Gordon, because it's funny, you know, after 2017 ADCC, I remember Tom DeBlas coming up to me. He's like, you're going to see tomorrow. You're going to see tomorrow. And I was like, all right, you won EBIs, big deal. Like, you know, jokingly, but I was never in the academy. So I didn't see what, you know, guys like Tom and yourself was saying. And then after that, and then after 2019, it's just like, oh my gosh, like this is he's it. Like, that's it. So we have this expectancy with Gordon, but with the Ty and Nicky, we know that these two young, you know, competitors are going to be, you know, they're going to be the highest level black belts one day. So it's crazy that I think it's just so cool that these are kids that are out there dominating and defeating black belts. And really, that's something that's never happened in our sport before, ever, with the age and with the belts. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's awesome, man.
Yeah,
and you know, it's. I think we're just gonna. This is just the beginning for these two. If they both keep continuing to compete and blah blah blah, like life does its thing. So you never know. But I think this is just the beginning. This is simply the beginning, and I think that's it's gonna be fun. Now, I will say, I have seen back in the day. Felipe Pena's older brother named Augusto, his nickname was Chiyoshiko. I have seen kids whoop some very good people. He was a kid, and he was very good when he was a kid. He was at Enzos for a while, and so at that time was actually the first time I'd ever seen that. I'm like, whoa, this 15-year-old kid, like, wow, this guy, he is good, and so it's no. I've seen it before, but now it's like, you know, these guys are not, they're just like on the highest level at such a young age. It's pretty crazy. And I think it's just going to come more and more and more. I mean, it's no mystery that the more people are involved in our sport, the more it grows, the faster it grows. The younger our athletes are going to get to those peak levels. And I think it's just going to keep coming. And there's going to be more and more youth that are like 18, 19, 20. They're just like, who are these kids? Oh my, you know, they're 16, 17-year-olds. What the heck?
I think that kid Mika Galvão was 15 and he fought a black belt in Brazil and tapped him out. Yeah. And the black belt that he tapped out was legit. I know the academy where the guy's from, Manaus. The guy was legit. I seen him compete at the Rio Grand Slam. Legit as it comes. So for that kid to tap him out, and again, you know, 15 years old, the generations that are coming now, because these kids are starting, you know, and I think the biggest difference between when you and I were training, you know, kids are starting so much earlier and continuing all the way till they get their black belt, and then they're just becoming savages. Whereas you and I probably started in our late teens, maybe early 20s. And then, you know, we always said the same thing. Oh, I wish I would have done this when I was younger, but these kids are doing it. They're doing what we wish, you know, so it's crazy to see, but I'm just stoked we get to see it go down. I love, you know, I think it's awesome that you and I get to have the best seats in the house. Unfortunately, not this weekend because this whole coronavirus shit that's going on, and hopefully it'll be over. But man, it's a huge honor, you know, to have you on here with me today. And it's always cool for me to commentate with you because I enjoy it, number one, but two, I learn, I go back after I'm like thinking about some of the stuff you said. So, you know, me to you, man, it's always a pleasure commentating with you.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I look forward to the future, buddy. I look forward to continued work and continued fun and watching this generation grow up, and who knows, maybe the next one too.
All right, guys. That's all the time I got for tonight. It's been about an hour long. It's kind of my time limit with these shows. Again, if you guys like the video, if you like the interview with me and Shawn, please share it. Like it, subscribe to both our channels. Shawn's got some great breakdown videos on his channel and instructional videos. I highly recommend it. Go check out his Williams Guard DVD. Any resources you can find on Shawn, please go check it out. And, you know, hopefully, like I said, we'll be on the commentating table soon enough, guys. So, Shawn, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you when I see it. Hopefully it'll be sooner than later.
Cheers. Thanks, brother. Stay safe, man.